And we're going to turn it over to Mark Bavisotto, the co-founder along my side here on Startup Summit. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the closing keynote. Super excited to have Scot Wingo, CEO of Spiffy. I'll hand it off to Mark, but I just wanted to give a big thumbs up to Scot. I saw the news on ABC of how Spiffy has pivoted from the car detailing, from the oil changes to doing the sanitization business. And that video was phenomenal in showing how you could turn a company around and add a lot of value really quickly. So a round of applause to you and congrats on that. So Mark, I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Everyone else, thank you so much. Craig, Rich, and Will, appreciate all your insights on helping people find and land job opportunities. So again, when we're trying to put this together, we're always trying to think about, where people are at in their businesses, and a lot of companies are struggling, right? And I think startups really have to think about how they can innovate, right? Sell what people need, not what they want, right? And I think, Scot is a great example of that, of everyone saw, the ABC news coverage of, his business was down a ton, right? And through talking to his supplier, he realized that, hey, there's an opportunity here for, again, to sell disinfecting things to businesses and stuff, to disinfect their businesses. And that's the thing you have to think about, kind of being that wartime CEO, right? Sell and provide value to what people need and companies need, not what they want. So it's my pleasure, as always, to introduce Scot Wingo, who's a great friend of Startup Summit and who's always helped us out through many of our events. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Scot. Scot, thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Scot's going to be a one-man band here. He said he wants to take it over, do it all himself. So, Scot, I'm turning the ball over to you, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Keith, and good to see Craig, Rich, and the whole panel there. As we're sheltering at home, one of the things I miss is running into everyone in the startup community at the coffee shops. We always kind of see each other at a Starbucks or a brew or something like that. So these types of events are fun for us to keep the Triangle entrepreneurial community together. So I wish I could be in front of you guys in a kind of a live setting, but we're going to make do with what we have. So as Mark teed up, he asked me to talk about how to be a wartime CEO. So what I want to do is give a quick background of myself, just so you have the context of who I am and what I've done over my career. Talk about what is this wartime CEO, where did this come from? And then I want to give you a case study of what we've done at Spiffy, and then give you a couple of references. I always get questions, what are your favorite startup books and references? So I wanted to share those. I do want to leave about 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A, so I'm going to go through my background pretty quickly, and so that we have plenty of time. I realize I'm coming, but it's Friday afternoon and you're probably tired of being on Zoom. So I'm going to try to keep it interesting and different. So I come from a little town in South Carolina called Aiken. If we were live, I would ask how many people are also from Aiken, and there's a 98% chance I'm the only person. It's a very small town. That's my house there. The only thing unique about my house is my dad was a software developer, and he started his own business, which was quite unusual at the time. Didn't like having a boss. I unfortunately inherited that. And then he, as part of his business, he got what was called a VAX, which is this huge computer. That's a picture of it there. And we had like 4 of them in our house. So imagine a room the size I'm in now, full of, it had to have its own air conditioner because these things generate a lot of heat, and then 4 refrigerator sized boxes. So all my friends would come over and be like, what the heck is going on? Those are the weirdest refrigerators I've ever seen. So I've been kind of surrounded by entrepreneurship my whole life. A big game changer for me is I got my first computer, which was a TI-99 4A. They used to have these little cassettes you would store on. Those of you that are from my generation, you'll remember that. Early Apples. That Apple IIc was my first portable computer. That's, it was called portable because you could take that bottom part and it had a handle, but they didn't really kind of say, and it doesn't really have a screen, so you're going to have to carry this 50-pound screen with you. But they called that portal. It's clever marketing. I went to where I'm from. You have 2 choices. One's a good one and one's a bad one. The good choice is you go to South Carolina. The other one is you go to Clemson. Boo. Sorry if there's any Tigers on here. So I went to University of South Carolina. Thought I wanted to create computers. So I did computer engineering, which is chips and stuff like that. But realized pretty quickly I'm not good at chips. I'm better at software. So I went to the software side. Then graduated during a really bad recession. So I'd always loved the Raleigh area from South Carolina would come up and visit, and went to NC State for my master's. So I'm a Wolfpacker. Then when I got out, I had 3 job offers. I could go to IBM, Motorola, or the startup that was started by a guy I had worked with. So I decided the downside of that startup was it was in Connecticut. So Connecticut's a beautiful state, but very cold. And so what I realized after 3 years there is I love startups. I became a manager. I kind of learned how to talk to customers, got out of that engineering box, and then realized I really loved this area and moved back in 1995 and have been here ever since. So in 1995, moved back here. Essentially my biggest asset was a 20-year-old beaten up 150,000 mile Honda Accord, if you could call that an asset. It's more of a liability, I guess, and decided with a couple of friends to start a business in the developer tool space. As a developer, I figured, I'm no marketing genius, but I know what developers like. It's pretty simple. They love to eat pizza, they love to drink beer, and they love to save time when they're coding and focus on fun problems versus boring problems. So that's essentially what we did at a company I started called Stingray Software. We provided software that helped developers. It had the components they needed to build world-class applications. So we scaled that up to about a 12 million run rate and sold it in 1998. Then in 99, I was very excited by this thing called the internet. Semi-created, the web at least was kind of popularized by Mark Andreessen. He will come up later in the story a couple more times. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'm going to give you guys a break from all my different Star Wars backgrounds today. It can be a little distracting during a talk, but maybe during Q&A, we'll whip some of them out for a fun Friday afternoon kind of thing. So because I'm a Star Wars collector, I was spending a lot of time on these auction sites. This is very early days of e-commerce, and I realized there was no aggregation point. So that's what we ended up building, called Auction Rover. This was during the dot-com bubble, so it was very exciting times for a while and then very depressing times. But we got out literally kind of right when the bubble was bursting, and I'll talk more about that. The company that acquired us was called Overture. They kept us going for a couple of years, and what we did is Auction Rover was finding things, but to help monetize it, we created listing software, so helping small businesses list on eBay, for example. That turned into one day, Motorola and IBM, ironically, were using that to sell stuff on eBay. And it was $20 a month, and they sold like $2 million worth of equipment. And we said, there's a business in there. That's kind of interesting. Why are these businesses liquidating stuff on eBay? Maybe we could productize that. So that kernel of an idea became ChannelAdvisor. So started that in 2001. And a lot of things went our way. So we were really big on this thing called marketplaces. Early days, they were called auctions, but then they turned into marketplaces. I can remember going to the board and saying, Amazon, the bookstore, is launching this marketplace. We think it's going to be big. No one agrees. We're going to bet the company on this. And obviously hindsight's 2020. That was a good bet. So at ChannelAdvisor, very long so I had 2 quick hits, and then ChannelAdvisor started in 2001, still an ongoing company. Most of you probably know someone at ChannelAdvisor. We have about 800 folks internationally. I'm still on the board. We raised $90 million. One of my life goals was to go public. So in 2013, we went public on the New York Stock Exchange. We're not social distance there. It's kind of funny. That's like the first thing you notice. Those of you that know Jason Kaplane, he's over there on the right. That's the suit. This is a picture from 2013. That suit is from 1975. So next time you see Jason, give him a hard time about his brown suit, his famous brown suit. I guess he doesn't get to wear suits a lot. So that was a really exciting time as an entrepreneur, because definitely, top thing on my bucket list. One of the second things on my bucket list is I'm a CNBC junkie, and I got to meet Jim Cramer, got to be on CNBC, got to do the whole pricing of the IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. So that gives you a little bit of background for me. What I would say the takeaways are, when I talk to a lot of young people about entrepreneurship, they always hold Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, the Google guys. Those are all great CEOs. But, they are Silicon Valley based, most of them. They went to Harvard or Stanford and dropped out because it was boring. I would never get into those schools, right? I probably barely squeaked into the University of South Carolina. So one of my points of telling that story is, if I can make it, anybody can do this, right? You just have to grind it out, work hard, and listen to customers and come up with ideas and try and iterate. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned that. Now let's talk about Wartime CEO. We're doing this obviously during a pandemic, so it's a good time. I kind of view that we are as a race, we're in a war, a human race, we're in a war with this virus. But as a company, our company is also in a war with this virus because it's obviously shut down a lot of stuff. And I know you guys all feel the same way. Another reason I bring up my background is this is not my first rodeo on dealing with a crisis. Okay, so I mentioned when I came out of NC State there, if you look at that one, that was there was a recession, and when I went from South Carolina to NC State, there was almost no one hiring. It was kind of the beginning of that leg down. This is GDP, and when GDP goes down, that's effectively a recession. If it goes down more than 10%, it's a depression. So kind of went through that one, and that was interesting. And then at Auction Rover, the .com bubble burst. That wasn't the one thing that tipped things over. That was very isolated to high tech companies. But then 9/11 really tipped the country into recession. There was a seminal article at the time from Barron's called "Burning Fast," and it really kind of, for the first time, everyone was enamored with these internet companies, and that really highlighted that that they didn't have cash to make it through a downturn, and then it kind of started the spiral. And then 9/11 happened unrelated. So that had to survive through that. And then Channel Advisor, we started in 01, and then we're still going. So we had to survive 08 and 09, and that was a lot harder than anything else we had gone through. So the Great Recession. The seminal thing there that I remember that was kind of like the aha moment that, okay, the poop's about to hit the fan, was Sequoia, one of the blue chip investors out there. They had an article called "RIP Good Times, RIP Good Times," and they brought all their CEOs in and said, look, something weird's going on with the credit markets, something's going on, we think you should tighten up. And then sure enough, 30 days later, that's when like the whole thing spiraled down. Bear Stearns cratered and all this kind of stuff. So that was, so those are just examples of some of the crises that I've been through in my career. So I've had a lot of experience, unfortunately, doing this. Part of it's just because I've been at this for what seems like forever at this point. So this is interesting. So this is 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, this is what happened to air travel. So you can see that it took a substantial dip down. So 9/11 obviously happened in 9/11 in September 11th. So that's that, essentially air travel went to zero, but then it came back like within 3 months. So very, what I would say is a sharp V-shaped recovery, right? So that was interesting. So it was one event. Some of these events you can kind of see coming, right? So the .com bubble burst, the 08, 09 recession, you could see them coming, and then they kind of like happened over 6 months. So you had a lot of time to get in front of them. 9/11 happened very quickly, and it was very scary in the middle of it. When you're at the bottom of that curve, it's very scary, but then it came back very quickly. So what's unique about this crisis is it happened really fast, not as fast as like a 9/11, but we really didn't have much warning, to be honest with you. I was, because I'm a CNBC junkie and a couple other things, I was kind of like a little worried. Also, one of my favorite movies, or one of the movies that I find interesting, is Contagion. So if you watch that movie, it's eerily similar to exactly what's going on right now. This is kind of what the pandemic looks like. So you see, this is air travel. So you can see kind of this from 3.4 to 3.20, just this kind of very rapid decline. Effectively in 14 days, the United States travel industry went down 98% and has stayed there. And, no one's really sure how fast it's going to come back. So that's a good kind of indication of how rapidly things have happened for a lot of businesses. If you're a restaurant, this is what it feels like. If you sell to restaurants, anything connected to travel is going to be impacted by this. And, I think there's some isolation here, but I think it is going to ripple through. Now, the big question, and I don't know the answer to this, is what's the recovery look like? once we are able to get out of sheltering? Is it, and again, I watch CNBC all the time. They talk about a V recovery. Most people have kind of said that probably won't happen, but it is happening in China. So there's a positive data point. People talk about a U-shaped recovery, so taking a little bit longer to bottom out and come out. Then some people talk about a long L, so coming out and then a very long kind of tail, kind of like a long tail kind of thing. Other people talk about, and evidently Germany's experiencing this, where they came out of, they kind of cratered and came out in a V, and then the infection rates climbed, so then they had to kind of come back down, and then so you could have a zigzag outcome. The thing that's important to note is, and it's interesting doing this talk in the middle of this, because hindsight's always 2020. What is this going to look like? It's impossible to predict and know. But in hindsight, you can always go back and evaluate how you did. So what is a wartime CEO? A wartime CEO, this phrasing comes from one of my favorite books. It's over there on the right-hand side, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. For the longest time as an entrepreneur, you could find these books. There was like a million books about, what kind of company should you do, marketing, selling, all these kinds of things. But there was never a book that really captured what happens after you get your business to like 5 to 10 million. At that point, you really had to rely on mentors here in the Triangle and other places, which was fine. So this book is one of my favorites because it really talks about what that part of being a CEO is like. Number one, no one ever tells you how kind of lonely it is, because when you work in a company, you can always complain about your workspace to other people. But when you're the CEO, you can't really go to to one of your management team people or someone in your company and be like, yeah, man, this kind of like really sucks, doesn't it? You just can't really do that. You have to be always positive. So that makes it kind of lonely. So he captures a lot of that sentiment in this book. One of the elements is he wrote a blog post about this in April of 2011, the Wartime CEO. In the context of that blog post, which I encourage you to read, was Eric Schmidt stepped down from Google, and then Larry Page stepped up. And he was kind of saying, here comes the wartime CEO. And I think the context there was they were going to go after Amazon. Now that ended up not working. So Amazon's just like kind of chipping away at Google pretty good right now, but that was the context then. And they expand on it in the book. So there's a lot of fun quotes. I'll run through a couple of these pretty quickly. The wartime CEO is too busy fighting the enemy to read management books written by consultants who have never managed a fruit stand. A wartime CEO may choose not to delegate. They take every decision based on the next product release. They may use a lot of profanity. So that's true. I'm going to keep this G to PG, but sometimes you do use a lot of profanity when the stress levels are high. Here's a bunch of them. I'm not going to read all these. One of my favorites here is the peacetime. So it's kind of comparing a peacetime CEO to a wartime CEO. The peacetime CEO sets big, hairy, audacious goals. That's from another one of my favorite books, Good to Great. The wartime CEO's BHAG is just surviving. And that's how I feel right now. It's kind of like, yes, we have big aspirations, but we have to put those on a shelf and survive so that we can kind of revive those big aspirations, because we're dealing with this crisis right now. Let me find another one here. What you're going to find is during this wartime, when you're as a company, you have to really hunker down and fight. It creates a lot of stress and friction amongst the team, and you have to be able to kind of navigate that. You can't go into this, hey, you just don't have time to say, hey, everyone, do you agree this is the right choice? You have to kind of like make a quick choice and hope that everyone kind of gets on the train and comes along, and that can create some stress. There's also an interesting thing that we could talk about in the Q&A, which is, can the same person be a wartime and a peacetime CEO? I feel like that's a skill I've had to develop of, kind of saying, all right, this is, kind of visionary CEO Scott, and I'm going to be very hands off, and this is what we're going to do, to like, oh shoot, things have hit the fan. We're going to have to get really involved and really focus, and it's going to feel different. So that's a background. If you want to learn more about that, I would point you to the Ben Horowitz stuff. It's exceptional and does a much better job explaining the trade-offs there than I possibly could. So here's our case study. So Spiffy, pre-pandemic, we have 3 ways we can grow. We can add services, we can add geographies, and then we can add lines of business. So we had developed starting in 2014, 4 lines of business. Residential services, that was about 5% of our business. It's a good business, but a better business is office parks, and an even better business is rental car companies. So 2 of our biggest product lines were office parks and rental car companies. And then we had just started a medium and heavy duty, which is interesting because that kind of ties into my e-commerce world. A lot of this is used in last mile e-commerce type deliveries. So you may have already guessed this, but boom, the coronavirus took out literally 95% of our lines of business. So I thought we had a pretty well diversified set of line of businesses, but the rental car part had grown so fast. In office park, we didn't really need to diversify on the residential side. Residential was kind of a third thing, and then we were just starting this medium and heavy duty. So that's that same traveler chart there. So what this has done is it's effectively knocked out a really big chunk of our revenue. So this is where I have a framework that I always work on. You could, your instinct is to kind of get in the fetal position and suck your thumb for a couple hours and cry. But that's not really going to help, right? Unless, it helps for your mental health just to do it for like maybe an hour, give yourself an hour. But then at some point you got to dust yourself off and go back at it. And what we discovered pretty quickly is we said, all right, this is bad, but what are our customers going to need? And we started talking to them. And one of our early rental car companies, they had one of the first 200 or 300 COVID patients had been in their rental car, and a COVID positive person. And what they essentially did was they just sealed it up, put it in a lot, literally, and surrounded it with tape, and just said, no one go near this car. So they said, what do we do? And we actually started doing a lot of research, and this is where we stumbled upon this silver lining. Our chemical provider, number one, is US based. This really saved our bacon because the Chinese supply chain locked up. Any one of our competitors gets cheaper Chinese chemicals, has been out of chemicals for literally months, and that's just now starting to wind back up. So not only, so that was good, but then also they actually specialize in EPA certified chemicals against viruses because their sister division sells to hospitals. So we took some of those chemicals, brought them over into the auto side, and we're able to prove their efficacy. They're on the EPA CDC list and all that good stuff. So then we were able to develop a core competency of dealing with these things and helping our customers understand that. This gives you an idea of our revenue. So we were off to a great start. We were actually ahead of plan, a huge plan this year, more than, almost like more than doubling our business. Then you can see it really just start to slide, and then the bottom fell out. Now I'm convinced if we didn't do some of the remediation stuff I'm going to tell you about, this would have gone down to almost zero. The blue line is our total revenue, and then the other ones are our different lines of business. So we immediately spun up 6 projects. This is on top of a team that's already pretty busy. So we decided, look, we've got to really ramp residential services. Our fleet business is so focused on rental cars. We need to diversify that. We need to we happened upon this facilities decontamination opportunity. We've had this idea of doing a third-party marketplace I'll walk you through. One of the number one requests we get is franchising, and then we're working on a secret project I can't reveal yet. So here's the timeline, and just to put this in context, 12/31 is when China alerted the WHO that there was a virus. So literally the last day of the year last year, and then 1/31 is when the travel ban came out against China. And I was watching that very closely. Then we had our first 100 cases by March, and that's when I started kind of switching into wartime mode. I was kind of like, this is bad. And then another thing is, I'm very familiar with logarithmic growth, and from logarithmic growth, the path from 1 to 100 is about the same as 1 to 1,000 and accelerates. So then, sure enough, in 9 days we had 1,000 cases, and then I was sure that this thing was going to be a huge problem. So I feel like I kind of caught onto it relatively early in hindsight. You always look and say, damn, I wish 1/31 I had known. But you have to be a little gentle on yourself because it's hard to know these things. So we launched the disinfection options in 312. 319, we worked to make sure we could be designated an essential service. Then we rolled out zero contact services, and then you can see there's 4 city expansions. We had opened up 15 cities where we were just doing fleets. So one of the big switches we said is primarily rental cars, if rental cars could go to zero, we need to start doing residential services in these areas. So, there's a heck of a lot of work our team did to execute on that that's not articulated by a bullet point here. Then we got lucky. You can see on 326 we launched facilities. One of our fleet customers is a rental truck company. They said, all right, we've had a COVID positive customer in our truck, but they also walked around the retail center, and the employees don't want to go back to work because they're really worried they're going to catch this. So they said, can you guys decontaminate the retail center? So we worked again with our chemical provider, got a really good understanding of, because their sister company does janitorial stuff at hospitals, got all their best practices and brought them over to a non-hospital facility. And then we did our first service on 326, and that has become a big line of business for us. So we have 4 different chemicals. I won't walk you through all that. Here's some pictures just to kind of show you, we have had to, another thing we had to get really good at is we have to deploy these across 17 markets. So we've kind of built a supply chain overnight for how do we get these products to our locations so that they can be used for our customers. Here's a map of the cities we opened. Here's a little graph of the at-home business. You can see it start to decline, and then we implemented zero contact and a bunch of other stuff. And I don't have the chart all the way through, but we actually are in the process of having a record residential day today from all these efforts that we've done to kind of counteract this downtrend. This is what the facilities looks like. We've invested in these fogging machines. These can help. Our early facilities were 2,000 or 3,000 square feet, which you can get at with spray bottles and that kind of thing. But now we're starting to do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 square foot. We've had some warehouses that we've done. So this hydro mister can spray the chemical in a really nice pattern that gets into the HVAC system to make sure you're getting a total disinfection across all surfaces, the air and the HVAC system. Another thing that really matters is trust of mind. Trust, ease of mind. So every time we do one of these, we do have a whole sanitization sticker and a lot of visibility that this area has been sanitized. Some more pictures of that. The third-party marketplace, 35% of our requests come in out of one of our service areas, so we get a lot of requests there. So the idea here is how can we provide something to them? So we've been recruiting non-Spiffy providers to get matched with those customers. Mark, how am I on time?
We have about 4 minutes or so.
All right, lessons learned. We recovered, if we hadn't done these things, it's hard to know the A/B test on this, and I don't want to know it. If we hadn't done all these remediations, we would have dropped to 95%. So we've only dropped 70%. Did I want to do that? No, but I think it's a win to do that. But then, what I think is going to happen is we're going to create our own V-shaped recovery. So, hopefully the economy does a V-shaped recovery, but you can't control that. As a startup, we just can't control that. So we're going to create our own V-shaped recovery. Go fast and break stuff. At this level, you just have to make a lot of decisions and guess and go fast and iterate quickly. I'll let you research this. Amazon has this thing where they talk about one-way doors and two-way doors. Any of these things we've done, we can always undo. So let's say the rental car market came back in a tremendous way. We could always turn down some of these things as well. So that gives us a two-way door. Keith mentioned the TV coverage we got. I won't play that. I know we're out of time. I'll zip through these resources. Mark, are we going to make the slides available to folks?
Yes, we can do that.
All right, so I'll get you a PDF of that. The last one I'll leave you with is, since the topic is wartime, usually in peacetime, this is like a little too much for me. It's a little too intense. My co-founder is ex-Army, and he loves this guy, Jocko Willinck. I think he was a Navy SEAL. He has a book called Extreme Ownership. That's really good. But this stuff gets you so fired up, you just can't sleep for days. But it's really good during this wartime. Let's do a little Q&A, Mark, and then I'll end with a quick video. What's the queue for questions? Do people raise their hand or?
Yeah, so we had to put them in the chat. We don't have any questions in the chat. So did you say you got a video to play?
Yeah. So I'll just give you a flavor for this Jocko stuff.
Direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, boss, we got this and that and the other thing. And I'd look at him and I'd say, good. And finally, one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem. And he said, I already know what you're going to say. I said, well, what am I going to say? He said, you're going to say good. He said, that's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say good. And I said, well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's going to be some good that's going to come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on the other one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. Learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out. Don't get startled. Don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well then hell, you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
Cool. So Jocko says, if you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive, still breathing. And if you're still breathing, you have some fight left in you. Get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, go out and attack. If that doesn't get you fired up, nothing will.
Very good. Thank you so much. For time's sake, and I know the people, it's Friday, people want to run. Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As Scott said, he'll send us over this PDF. We'll make it available to you. And I think a lot of you out there, it's a great time to become a wartime CEO and provide the needs out there. And again, Scott, thank you so much.